really like to tell you about what's going on in Iran right now. I feel like a lot of people are really uneducated about Iran, and that's not necessarily your fault. I feel like the American education system does a bad job at teaching us about Iran, and therefore a lot of people are just unaware, and I think it's better late than never to learn. First, I should just let you know that for the past 50 years, Iran and all its people have been under a religious dictatorship against their will. In 1979, 47 years ago, there was a revolution in which the Shah, the king of Iran, was overthrown and the monarchy ended, thus bringing in an extremist regime, and Iran became the Islamic Republic of Iran. Very, very important to stress to you. The Iranian people never, ever wanted this to happen. They went from being a pretty westernized country to having all of their basic human rights stripped from them. A lot of the rights that were taken away were specifically targeted to women. An example, when the Islamic regime took over, they lowered the age that you can get married at for a woman from 18 to 13 years old in 1979, and then in 1982, if I'm not mistaken, they brought it down to age 8. The list goes on, and both men and women were negatively affected beyond belief by all these mandates and by the harshness of the Islamic Republic. There's not a single person of right mind in Iran that has ever wanted this dictatorship. I also just like to say that there's a creator on here named Saya Sultani whose videos I love, and she just said the other day in a video she made that I just wanted to re-articulate. Nobody wants to be an immigrant. Nobody wants to leave their homeland where they speak the language and have their family and have their friends, to leave and go to a foreign place where they know no one, they don't know the language, they have to start from zero again. Nobody wants to do that. There are so many Iranian immigrants throughout the entire world, which just goes to show how many Iranians in 1979 or a little sooner or a little later left, fleeing for their lives, their livelihoods, and their families, and for a better future. Now to bring us to where we currently are, we are once again facing lots of protests that are happening in Iran, and the reason why these started about 2 weeks ago is because the economy has just tanked. So, protests started because of that. Shops were going on strike, and the protests quickly turned into anti-regime protests. And now there are Iranians in more than 180 cities in Iran right now that are fighting on the streets for their rights, for a free Iran. The point is, more people need to talk about this and be aware of what's going on. Diaspora is currently filled with a lot of hope that these protests may actually truly lead to a free Iran.
It seems as if World War III is imminent. Again. US President Donald Trump said around 2 hours ago that he is considering strikes against Iran. He's considering a very heavy pushback. We don't know what that looks like. This comes at a time when bodies are reportedly piling up in Iranian hospitals. And the internet has been shut down for more than 50 hours. Protesters are being massacred on the streets by the Iranian police. The president has called for unity in Iran and has pledged to overhaul the sanctions, and has said that they will bomb the US back and they will bomb Israel back if they are struck. You should know this is not the first time that the US has been involved in either striking Iran or regime change in Iran. The US backed the 1953 overthrow of the Iranian government, which basically set in motion what we have right now. As many of you may be aware already, protests have been ongoing for the past 2 weeks, and the US president saying now that he's going to strike Iran is probably the biggest escalation thus far. And the protests have gone global. Demonstrators were seen in London, in Paris, and Istanbul in support of the protesters in Iran. And it goes without saying that you cannot talk about what is happening right now without referencing the US sanctions that have crippled the Iranian economy for the past several decades. We know after what happened in Venezuela that the US does not respect international law or the United Nations or anything, so I genuinely don't know what is going to happen.
Isn't it weird how nobody on the left is talking about the protests in Iran right now? And these are the same people who constantly preach to us about human rights, and yet when you've got one of the biggest human rights uprisings that we've seen in modern history, they're totally silent on it. They're too busy protesting basically for the right to run over federal law enforcement officers.
Be about to fact check this First, if you mess with me, make sure hit that follow button. Let's get it. What the hell is he talking about? Wasn't it last year that Republicans and MAGA saying that they don't want their taxpayer money to go into foreign affairs? Reports said that 67% of Republicans wanted their foreign policies to be focused on America. Now in 2026, Republicans and MAGAs asking for our taxpayer money to fund regime change? Y'all don't even know why Iran is protesting, and some of it is America's fault. First, Iran is facing an extreme inflation problem, meaning that their basic necessities are extremely expensive. Not to mention mention that Iran sits on a huge oil reserve, but because they're facing sanctions and the price of oil is going down, they're not making enough money for the economy, which is why the people of Iran are protesting. And the Iranian government are attacking these protesters' rights. Not only are thousands getting arrested, but over 500 people lost their lives. And although it's not at the same extent as Iran, America is facing the same problem. Inflation increased 0.2% in November and has stayed the same since in December, meaning our basic necessities are still at high prices. I mean, if we look at food, energy, and other things, majority of these prices has not gone down. Now, we also seen a slight decline in the unemployment rate, but it's also been reported that Meta just had a massive layoff and Boeing is about to do the same thing. And under Donald Trump's second administration, over 15 shootings has happened with ICE. What's happening in Iran is a tragic thing and needs to be highlighted, but it seems like Republicans and MAGA aren't America first anymore.
This is the most classic manufacturing of consent I have ever seen. Because this is Trump considering striking Iran because of protests happening, despite most protesters not supporting American intervention almost universally being anti-democratic, and even international human rights organizations supporting the protests, calling for not a single bomb to be dropped, and noting the correct thing, which is that it will not work. Strikes don't work. That's why we've been striking Syria for the past 20 years. That's why we've been striking Yemen for the past 20 years, because they don't work. And yet, the Imperial New York Times will do it every single time because the goal of their focusing on the protests was never for the Iranian people, never for the freedom of the Iranian people, never for the democratization of Iran, but was so that America, through whatever avatar they choose, can push its interests. And its interests have always been to destabilize Iran because it stands as a bulwark in one way or another against American economic interests. It always has. That's why they were so scared of Saddam Hussein, not because of his human rights record. They were funding worse human rights records in Saudi Arabia. And this is why, when we are reporting on it, when we are talking about it, when we are discussing it, we must be so staunchly, principally, and annoyingly anti-intervention. They are asking you if they want intervention. And if you don't say anything but no, it's a yes.
Iran has just launched missiles at U.S. bases. 6 missiles reportedly fired at a base in Qatar. That's the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, and more aimed at a base in Iraq. Explosions were heard over Doha, air raid sirens, interceptors scrambling. The United States Embassy literally told Americans to shelter in place. Airspace is absolutely closed. This isn't a drill. This is a credible escalation. Iran is officially retaliating for Trump's massive airstrike on their nuclear facilities. And while some of those missiles were shot down, this sends one very clear message. We are in it now. It's now U.S. troops, U.S. bases, U.S. citizens directly in the line of fire. And if Iran thinks Trump is going to back down after this, they clearly haven't been paying attention. We're watching history unfold in real time. Buckle up, because the next move, well, it's Trump's, and he's in the Situation Room. Appreciate you.